This is the story of the 1961 Goldsboro incident. Now, the US has bombed a lot of places, from Syria to Japan to Iraq to Afghanistan to Iran to Pakistan to Kuwait to Libya to North Carolina to. Wait, what? Yep, North Carolina almost made the list of places that America bombed. This is how. Now, to understand the climate in which this accident took place, we need to take a small history lesson. It was 1962 and the Cold War could turn hot at any second. The two major superpowers of the world, the US and the USSR, were sure that the other would launch a preemptive nuclear strike so powerful that it would decimate the receiver. To ensure that this didn't happen, both sides got together and engaged in dialogue to reach a mutual disarmament treaty that protected peace. I'm just kidding. Both sides devised techniques to make sure that they could return fire, or in this case nukes, even if their command and control centers had been reduced to radioactive ash. The US did this by having nuclear-tipped bombers in the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years on end. That doesn't sound expensive at all. So, even if the Soviets did launch a sneak attack, America could still respond. This was Operation Chrome Dome. It was simple enough. Keep a few bombers in the air at all times with nukes, just in case you want to hop across the Atlantic for a bit. At about midnight on the 24th of January 1961, a B-52 from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Goldsboro, North Carolina, was in the air as part of Operation Chrome Dome. They had been airborne for about 12 hours, and in the dead of night, they were preparing to hook up with a tanker for a top-up. On board the bomber were two Mark 39 nuclear weapons. Now, we're not sure how powerful the bombs were. Some declassified documents say that the bombs were 24 megatons each, and some others say that they were about 4 megatons each. Now, for some context, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was just 15 kilotons. The best case scenario here is that the ones carried by this B-52 was 226 times more powerful than the one dropped on Hiroshima. As the two planes hooked up, the operator in the tanker could see that something was wrong with the bomber. It seemed to have a leak in its right wing, and fuel streamed out. The pilots on the B-52 saw the effects of the leak on their instruments. The fuel quantity on board dropped. The plane was sent into a holding pattern so that they could lose some weight. But as it reached the holding point, the pilot of the B-52 reported that they had lost about 37,000 pounds, or 17 tons of fuel, in just 3 minutes. That's one adult's weight in fuel being lost every single second. The plane was immediately instructed to return to Seymour Air Base. As the bomber made its way back, it shed even more fuel. Somehow the stricken bomber made it near the airbase, and the pilots were lining the plane up to land on runway 26. That's when the right wing gave out. The plane started rotating as it dived towards the ground. Centrifugal forces started to pull the plane apart. The centrifugal force pinned some of the pilots to the wall of the plane as they were in free fall. By the time they hit 9,000 feet, the pilot in command ordered everyone to bail out. Out of the 8 crew members, 5 people survived. But the story of this B-52 is far from over. As the plane impacted the North Carolina countryside, residents saw the night turn into day, and they rushed over to the crash site. But unknown to them, the 2 Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs had been thrown clear of the falling plane. One of the bombs fell away harmlessly, but the other started its arming sequence. The parachute deployed, and that slowed its fall. This was done so that the bomber that dropped the weapon would have enough time to get away from the inevitable column of fire that was coming. The nuke hits the ground, and luckily for everyone, it doesn't go off. There's an image of a bomb just embedded in the mud with its tail in the air. It looks like something out of a Looney Tunes cartoon, much less real life. When they went through the wreckage of the plane, they found the arming switch for the nukes in the armed position. Now, let me make one thing clear. The weapons did not detonate because no one armed the weapons prior to the breakup. But the forces of impact set the switch to the armed position. This happened after the bombs had separated. To understand how close North Carolina came to getting nuked, we need to understand how to arm a nuclear weapon. I swear, researching this video has probably put me on some sort of watch list. So if you could like and subscribe, it'll be all worth it. So here's how you arm a Mark 39 thermonuclear device. If you're following along at home, please get your thermonuclear device now. The weapon has two broad parts: the nuclear section, the section that goes boom, and the fusing section, the section that tells the nuclear section when to go boom. According to declassified documents, the Mark 39 has two fusing pathways. The weapon had a switch in the nose that would close when it impacted the ground, letting the fusing system know that it was time to detonate the device. Or it had a system that would detonate the bomb when it sensed an altitude change of 1,500 feet. Once the bombs had separated from the aircraft, both of them started their fusing sequences, which meant that they were looking for that signal to initiate the detonation sequence. But this should not have happened. You see, all of these systems are powered by onboard generators and batteries. In a safe state, the generators can't power the device because it has pins called safing pins inserted into it. When they examined the device, they found that during the breakup sequence, the pins were pulled out of the generator, activating it. Now, from what I can tell, the pins are removed by pulling a lanyard, and it was the centrifugal force of the spinning plane that pulled the pins out, which activated the generator, which powered the fusing system. Now, the really incredible thing is that the report said that the pins were pulled out in a quote, normal fashion, which meant that it was done as if someone was trying to actually drop the bomb. For bomb number 1, once it had cleared the plane, the parachutes deployed, and it had solenoid sensors to check if the parachutes were out. That's another prerequisite for arming, and that had been met. As far as this bomb was concerned, it had been dropped over enemy territory. I found a memo by a scientist called Parker Jones, and he said that 3 of the 4 steps needed to arm the weapon were completed. Let that sink in. There were 4 failsafes, and 3 of those failsafes failed. It is scary how close North Carolina came to nuclear annihilation. So what saved North Carolina from nuclear disaster? Well, as it turned out, just one switch. You remember the switch that they found in the arm position in the wreck? Well, that was in the arm position due to impact forces. But for the weapon to detonate, you had to manually set it to arm, like in the movies. What this switch did was that it provided a pathway between the generators and the onboard batteries. So, if you don't have a link between the generator and the batteries, the weapon won't explode, and that's what saved the day. What's really interesting about this is how different people have different tones about this accident. The scientist has more of a "holy crap, we were so close to an accidental detonation." He says, quote, "One simple dynamo technology low voltage switch stood between the United States and a major catastrophe," end quote. On the other hand, the report by the Sandia Corporation, who partially designed the bombs, takes a more "I don't see why everyone's so mad. Everything worked out as it should have" approach. Here's a quote from their report. "The arm/safe switch prevented a nuclear detonation in these weapons, as it was designed to do," end quote. To be fair though, they do mention some fixes that could make the bomb a lot more safer. But I just find the two opposite reactions to the same accident absolutely interesting. But the scientist does have a point. The only reason these weapons did not go off was because of sheer dumb luck. If the plane had broken apart in another way that armed the switch, or if there had been a short circuit between the generator and the batteries, this nuke would have blown. But how bad would it have been if it had detonated? Well, the fireball would be about 1.2 miles wide, and buildings within a 5-mile radius would be flattened. People in an 11-mile radius would get third-degree burns. Now, this is bad, but the geopolitical implications are downright scary. Imagine this. Eisenhower is woken up in the middle of the night by a call or a text or a telegram or whatever was the mode of communication back then, saying, "North Carolina has been nuked." I think his first thought would be that this was a preemptive strike by the Soviets. Who knows? Maybe he would have ordered a retaliatory strike in response to the perceived attack. I mean, countries have gone on full nuclear alert for much less. In 1983, NATO carried out the war game Able Archer 83 in Europe. The Soviets, fearing a genuine first strike, readied their entire nuclear arsenal in preparation for war. What do you think would have happened if the bomb had exploded? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. We still have one question to answer. Why did the B-52 crash in the first place? This is mini-air crash investigation after all. Well, it came down to a design decision. Prior to this, the B-52 had bladders in its wings, which held fuel. But this was replaced with a wet wing design, where the wings held a lot more fuel, and this allowed for significant weight savings. But these savings came at the cost of rigidity. The constant flexing from low-level flying meant that fatigue cracks were showing up earlier than ever. This was especially true for the parts in the wings that had been made out of aluminum alloy. In response to this, the flying hours were severely limited for B-52s until a fix could be applied. Now, if this has freaked you out, let me freak you out a little bit more by letting you know that they never really found the second bomb. Well, it disappeared into some marshy land and they dug about 50 feet for it, but only found parts of it. So today, you're not allowed to dig on that land. Also, here's some more unsettling news. The US has in total about lost 8 nuclear weapons. We have no idea how many the Russians have lost. Now, before you go, here are a few caveats for this video. The whole arming sequence of the Mark 39 is an educated guess. The documents that I referred to were highly redacted, and that's the best that I could make of it. In a way, I'm kind of glad that there isn't a step-by-step procedure on the internet for arming a nuclear weapon. If you want to watch another mini-air crash investigation video, how about the story of this A320 that could not stop on the runway? Thank you for watching this episode of Mini-Air Crash Investigation. If you like the videos that I make, do consider liking and subscribing. It will really help the channel grow. I will catch you guys next time. Stay safe.